Hello everyone, this is Kevin Cofield with Cofield Aviation. Welcome into Performance and Limitations Part 2. In this video, we're going to discuss weight and balance, so how to compute a weight and balance, all the terms associated with the weight and balance. We're also going to calculate performance data, so takeoff data, landing distance data. And also, we're going to go through the 91103, which is the pre-flight actions are required that the FAA requires. NWKRAFT is the way we remember that. I mentioned that in the pilot qualifications video, but we're going to go through that as well. So this is an important video for all of the current flight school students because you're basically going to do this. This is going to be kind of your ticket to get in the airplane. So you're going to be doing this every single time you fly. So I just basically will walk through how to accomplish this. So this video is great for, a refresher if you kind of forget. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, I'm on the CofieldAviation.com website, and we're going to go here to the student section, and then we're going to go to downloads. We're going to go here to I'll go here to performance and limitations. And then we're going to start with the weight and balance. So performance and limitations part 1, we left off at V speeds. In performance and limitations part 1 video, we discussed the 5 types of altitudes. We discussed the 4 types of air speeds. And then we also discussed these V speeds. But this video is again, basically, we're going to talk about weight and balance and performance data. So let's talk a few terms first before we get into calculating the weight and balance. So here's some terms that are important to understand when it comes to weight and balance. So weight times arm equals moment. This is going to be something you're going to do a lot of. Let's just explain each term here. So weight is simply weight, right? So the weight of the fuel, the weight of people, the weight of bags, or whatever, right? So weight is weight. Everything weight-wise is super easy to calculate because you know your own weight, you know the baggage weight, and so forth. Fuel is a little more complicated. We just do 6 pounds per gallon, so we have to do a little bit of math when we calculate the fuel weight. We'll do that. You'll see that in just a minute at 6 pounds a gallon, but weight is weight, so that's pretty easy. Now, what is arm? Okay. So what arm is arm is the distance measured in inches aft of the datum point. Okay, well, what's the datum point? Okay, datum point is simply just a point of reference. That's all it is. The datum point is 0 arm, if you will, and everything else, the arm is just measured from a datum point, and it's different on every single airplane, okay? Now, you need to look up in your weight and balance manual or your type certificate data sheet to determine where the datum point. But again, datum point is just 0. So I want to show you where we get that for our aircraft. Now, these are just excerpts right out of the weight and balance manual. So you can go to the downloads tab on the website, go to the weight and balance manual, and you'll see these graphs that I have here. So our datum point is right here. So if you see, it's just forward of the firewall. So that is 0. Okay, so anything in front of the datum point would be a negative arm. Everything aft is positive arm. So if you see here, this is just inches aft of the datum point. Again, the datum point is just a point of reference. It's different for any airplane. It's just where 0 is, okay? It's where we measure from. And then this arm is just simply inches after that datum point. So you see here, seats are 34 to 46 inches, or the reason why that is because seats can move forward and they can move aft. So they move forward and back. An average of that is 37, so that's a good number to use when we're doing weight and balance stuff. The rear passenger seat is 73 inches aft of this. The baggage is 95 inches after this. And then there's another little cubby hole baggage area that's 100 and 8 inches after the datum point. So where do we find the datum point? One, it's right here, but also I'm going to show you on the type certificate data sheet. Remember, this is just on the website, so we can go here to the type certificate data sheet. And if you scroll down to data pertinent to all models, all right, here it is right here. It shows us where the datum is. Now, there's 2 of them, but our serial number falls in right here. So our datum point is specifically the lower front face of the firewall. So go to you've heard me mention type certificate data sheet a few times, right? But the type certificate data sheet is great stuff, right? So go to your type certificate data sheet for your aircraft. You'll see your datum point is listed, and this is exactly where it is. The lower front face of the firewall is what it says for ours, and then that's showing a visual indication, the lower front face of the firewall right there. Now, if you don't remember how to look up your type certificate data sheet, go to airworthiness requirements video. I go through how you can look that up. So if you see here, it's pretty easy. ARM is just a measurement in inches after the datum point, okay? Everything after this datum point is in inches, is in the positive inches. Everything forward of this, so anything engine-wise or oil or anything like that, is going to be negative numbers. Okay, so let's go to another term here, which is the term of moment. So we said weight times arm, so simply weight times how far you are from the datum point equals moment. So moment, the only thing moment is the force applied, okay? So weight times arm equals the force applied equals the moment, all right? So think about moment as if you have a rusty bolt or something you're trying to get off. If you use a wrench that's this long, you may not break it free. But if you use a wrench that's this long, then you are applying so much force this far aft of the datum point, you're applying a whole lot more force, okay? So that's what we're looking at when we talk about moment, is just the force applied, okay? So the further we get aft of the datum point, the more force we are applying, and the more it will affect our center of gravity. That's our whole point of doing a weight and balance, is to determine where we fall in the envelope, where we fall in the center of gravity envelope, okay? So weight times arm equals moment. Again, weight is weight. Arm is measured in inches past the datum point. Moment is just the force, okay? So weight times arm equals moment. Moment divided by the weight will then equal our CG. You'll see that in the worksheet that we'll do. It's the worksheet that all of our students will do before they fly. We can determine our CG, and that's just going to basically come up with the arm of where that airplane would balance, how many inches after the datum point, where that airplane, if you put it on a pole, how many inches after that datum point where it would balance, okay? With all the people and the bags and everything in there, the last thing we can compute is a CG. And again, that'll be the CG will be your arm, basically where your arm is in inches after the datum point of where this thing would balance, okay? So again, datum point is just forward of the firewall. We read exactly lower front face of the firewall of the top certificate data sheets, what it said. And then arm is expressed in inches aft of the datum point. Now, in your AFM, if you're not one of our students, in our AFM, you have a sample loading problem in every single weight and balance manual, okay? So please, for your aircraft, go to your AFM and go to your sample loading problem and just work right down that, okay? Now, I've simplified it a little bit for our students. I've created our own sample loading problem, if you will. But this is our sample loading problem in our POH. And again, if you just look in your AFM or your POH to determine that, okay? Now, a few terms that we want to look at here. So this is our center of gravity envelope. So if you look right here, we have normal category and utility category. So let's explain a little bit about what is normal category and what is utility category. However, before we do that, I want to explain to you the importance of this envelope, okay? So center of gravity moment envelope. If you see here, what we need to come up with is at the end, when we do our weight and balance, we will come up with a weight, and then we will come up with a moment. Let me kind of scroll down there. Moment. This is moment divided by 1,000, okay? So we don't have to technically go to that extra step to determine our center of gravity, because all we need to come up with is moment and weight, and we know weight times arm equals moment. You'll see that on the worksheet in just a minute. But I want to explain why we have this envelope right here and why it's important that we make sure that our center of gravity falls in this envelope for the entire flight, okay? So this envelope represents stability. And what I mean by that is this aft line right here, okay? This aft line, if we keep it from that aft line forward, what we are guaranteeing is we are guaranteed that our center of gravity is forward of our center of lift. All right. So, we have the four forces of flight, right? You've heard me talk about it a lot. We have thrust, we have lift, we have weight, and we have drag. Okay. So what we're determining in the weight and balance is, where is this center of weight? Where does that weight center as far as center of gravity? And we're coming up with an exact inches after the datum point, so we can tell exactly where this weight is centered. However, do you have a way to determine where that lift is centered? We have a center of lift, or a center of pressure. We also have a center of gravity. However, we don't have any charts that tell us how to calculate the center of lift, because it doesn't matter. We calculate the center of gravity, and if we keep it in this envelope, what we are guaranteed is that center of gravity is forward of the center of lift. Now, why is that important? When this airplane stalls, we talk about aircraft stability, okay? When the wing stalls, the wing quits producing lift, right? And so if the center of gravity is forward of the center of lift, then when we lose lift back here, center of gravity is forward of it. So what will happen? The nose will drop. The angle of attack will reduce without you doing anything, and then it restores airflow back over the wing, which means the airplane's back flying again. So that's super, super important. So this aft line right here guarantees us that that center of gravity is forward of the center of lift, meaning when we lose lift, the center of gravity will pull the nose down, which restores airflow back over the wing, which helps you, which you recover from the stall just like that. That's the reason why stalls are literally the first thing that you do, maneuver wise, as a student, because it's the easiest one. You just don't do anything. Don't get in the airplane's way, and the aircraft stability will lower the nose, and airflow will restore back over the wing. That lowers the angle of attack without you doing absolutely anything. Because if we, and this is why it's important that we do a weight and balance every single flight, so that we are positive that that center of gravity, so we have a center of lift, we have a center of gravity. So we're positive that that center of gravity is forward of this center of lift, meaning when we lose lift, that center of gravity will lower that nose and restore airflow back over, okay? So if we ended up back here, all right, we would not be guaranteed that the center of gravity is forward of the center of lift. So if we were after this envelope, we're test pilots. We don't know. So if the airplane was to stall and our center of gravity is back here, our center of gravity could be after the center of lift, which means we would never be able to recover from the stall, right? And that's not good, right? So we don't care where the center of pressure or the center of lift is. We do care where the center of gravity is. And if we keep it in this envelope, we're guaranteed to have aircraft stability. We're guaranteed to have that center of gravity forward of the center of lift, okay? So, as we get further aft here, the airplane's getting a little more unstable, right? But we still are guaranteed, as long as we keep it above this side of the center of gravity, this back line, okay? So then that begs the question to go, well, all right, well, why don't we have this forward line, right? If if this provides us more stability, like why can't we be way over here in the center of gravity? Well, yeah, if our center of gravity was right here, we would have super good aircraft stability. And the fact that our center of gravity, our center of weight, our center of gravity would be way ahead of our center of lift. All right. So that means if we stall, boy, it's really going to want to recover like really quick, like super quick, right? That's a good thing. However, the reason why we have this forward line right here is because on landing, we need enough elevator effectiveness so that we can flare, okay? So that we can transition in that slow flight to power off stall. You know, the landing is as simple as fly as close to the runway as possible without letting it touch, right? So we transition from slow flight to a power off stall. We want to hear that stall warning horn going off right there, just right above the runway. So if our CG was way up here, all right, we wouldn't have enough elevator effectiveness to keep the nose off. And so we would not be able to flare. It would just hit the ground like this. It would start to porpoise. It would possibly collapse the nose gear because the nose gear is a weak portion of the landing gear. That's the reason why we hold it off, hold it off, hold it off. The main gear can take a beating, all right? The nose gear cannot, all right? So we fly as close to the runway as possible without letting it touch, all right? It's a whole lot better to drop it from 5 feet or so on the main gear than to slam it down on the nose gear. So that's the reason why this forward part of our center of gravity envelope is there, so that we're able to hold that nose off and to flare. All right. So all of our job is just to keep it in this envelope. All right. So now if you see, we have two different envelopes. We have a utility category. We have a normal category. So let's talk about what the difference those are. So here are the standard airworthiness certification categories here. So we're going to start off. They certify acrobatic category. So I used to have a Citabria. It was certified in the acrobatic category. So acrobatic aircraft has very minimal flight maneuvering restrictions. It can have up to 9 seats in addition to the pilot and a maximum weight of 12,500 pounds. Okay. There's a commuter category. That's not us. Here's us right here. Normal category. So normal aircraft are not approved for aerobatic flight. They have a total seating capacity of 9 or fewer persons and a maximum 12,500 pound takeoff weight. Okay, so this is us right here. This explains what the normal category is for us. So normal category, we are not approved for any aerobatic items. However, in normal category, you can do everything that you need to do in the private pilot and commercial certificate. So you can do stalls, you can do all that stuff in the normal category, okay? You just can't do any certain aerobatic maneuvers, all right? Transport category is your large jets here, and then last is utility category. So we have utility category as well labeled. So if you see utility category, you can have a maximum of 9 passenger seats plus the pilot. They weigh up to 12,500 pounds. Utility aircraft are authorized to perform limited aerobatic maneuvers right here. So basically, you can do spins. So if we wanted to do spins, you got to do spins for your CFI initial certificate. If you wanted to do spins, the center of gravity would have to fall in the utility category envelope. We cannot do spins in normal. So basically, normal is you can do everything but spins. Utility category is basically that's the only aerobatic maneuver. Aerobatics is not, you know, um, approved in the utility category, but you can do spins. And again, see your weight and balance manual to tell you exactly what you can and can't do. So that is the main difference between normal and utility category. So your normal category, there is no acrobatic maneuvers allowed. And then the utility category, you can do certain aerobatic maneuvers. Well, basically spins. All right. So if you see, if we're doing spins, look how far forward the CG has to be. Well, that makes sense because if you're ever doing intentional spins, you want to make sure that CG is way forward so that you're able to recover. But we got a maximum weight of 2,000 pounds for the utility category to do spins, and then your CG would have to fall in this envelope. If you can't get it in this envelope, can't do spins. It's not approved for spins, okay? Normal category, 2,300 pounds, maximum gross weight, and that's what we're going to do to, that's what we're going to figure out to get our weight and balance. So, all right, now that you kind of understand all of the terms for the weight and balance, we're going to compute this weight and balance just like you're going to do on the sheet every single time before flight, okay? Now, we'll say this loading graph does the exact same thing as what we're going to do, and the fact that you could use this loading graph, and you see here, you just can go to basically your weight, you come to pilot in front passengers, and then it gives you a moment divided by 1,000. You could go here to fuel, however much fuel you have, come down, it gives you the moment. You can go to your weight, how much you have in the rear passenger, come down and get a moment. So you can use this loading graph to do the same thing that we're going to do with this worksheet. However, I think it's just more accurate and easier just to do it this way. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Again, our students are going to be super familiar with this this sheet. All right, so again, calculations, weight times arm equals moment. So if you see, this is kind of like that sample loading problem that's actually in the POH for us, right? Except we've just went ahead and added these arms. I will show you where we're getting this information, okay? So simply, all we're coming up with is weight times arm equals moment. In order to go to that center of gravity chart, we need a weight, and then we need a moment, okay? So let's go ahead and start. We start with the basic to empty weight. Where do we get that, right? Remember the aero documents, the W, the weight and balance? That has to be supplied. So it doesn't matter what airplane you have, you don't know the empty weight of that airplane without that weight and balance document. That's the reason why it's required to be on board the aircraft. So that's aircraft specific. That tells us the weight and the moment, okay? Now, if we wanted to know the arm, if we wanted to know, where this airplane would balance without fuel or passengers or bags or anything in it, we could just take this moment divided by weight, and that would give us our arm, okay? But that doesn't really matter at this standpoint. Okay, so we're going to start with the pilot and front passenger. So I'm 180 pounds. Let's just say a typical student may be around 200. So what we're going to do is we're going to go here, and I'm going to put in, let me first change this to black, take that down a little bit. So we'll say, 200, 180. So we'll go 380 there. All right. And then basically we're just going to go 380 times 37. Now, where am I getting that 37, right? Well, there is several different ways that we can do that. So I'm going to go to the weight and balance manual, which is right here. And there it is right there. So there's where we're getting that 37. You see pilot and front passenger 37, rear passenger 73, baggage 95, and then aft baggage 108. Okay, so I'm not going to reference that again. I'm just going to show you this is where you're getting all of that information. However, it's lacking one thing. It's lacking the fuel. All right, so let me show you here. So we're back at the type certificate data sheet. I'm going to go to the mic model. Okay, there we go. So here's our mic model type certificate data sheet. If you will see, all of our arms are on here too. You see number of seats, 4. You have 2 at 34 to 46. So that's where we came up with 37. 2 at 73. Here is maximum baggage, 120 pounds at plus 95. So that's a limitation. We can only put 120 pounds of bags in the back. So don't let an examiner or even me ask you a question of, hey, your buddy brings a 150-pound bag, and you throw it in the baggage compartment because that would be exceeding the limitations. But right here, so if you can see fuel capacity, 42 gallons total, 38 gallons usable. You have two tanks at plus 48, okay? So you can find all of these arms right on the type certificate data sheet for your aircraft. And then I've also added this. So if you will look, this systems and limitations, I've also added the arms on there. Okay, so if you can see, here's our seat, so that comes straight out of the type certificate data sheet. Here's our fuel arm. Here's our maximum baggage. All right, there's our empty weight in our CG. There's normal and utility category. Okay, so I'm just showing you where I'm coming up with those numbers in that box, because it's important for you to know where that comes from. Okay, so between the weight and balance manual and the type certificate data sheet, that's where those numbers are coming from. And I've just made this systems and limitations sheet basically a carbon copy of the type certificate data sheet. Okay, so we're back to here. I can't do math, so I'm going to let the calculator do that for me. So we're going to do 380 times 37, and that equals 1460. Okay, so we're going to go 14,060 right there. All right. Simple as from here. Now your rear passengers, you know how much rear passengers away. We're just going to go ahead and say maybe we throw our books. Maybe you've got your Gleam pilot kit back there. So we're just going to say we're just going to throw like 20 pounds back there. So 20 times 73 is going to be 1460. We're going to put 1460 in there. Baggage number 1. And again, rear passenger, I just did 20 times 73. Remember where we got that number, weight and balance manual. Baggage, we're going to do the same thing. We keep some oil back there, some other things, cleaning supplies. So we're going to do another 20 pounds times 95 is going to be 1900. All right. Remember, we got that arm from the weight and balance manual and the type certificate data sheet. Baggage 2, we don't have anything back there. That's in that super back cubby hole there. And so then from here, we just total up our empty totals. Okay, so we're going to go, don't forget to add the empty weight. All right, so we're going to go 1480.52 plus 380 plus 20 plus 20 equals, we're going to go 1900.52. Okay, let's kind of move that over just a little bit. There we go. And then our moment, don't forget to add this. So we're going to be 66,017.8 plus 1460 plus, or 14,060 plus 1460 plus 1900 equals 83,437.8. Okay. All right, now, so we come down here, we come to fuel. All right, so fuel, you've got to use, we have that little dipstick in the back of the airplane. That is usable fuel. We don't care about total fuel. Nobody cares about total fuel. All we care about is usable fuel. We have 38 gallons usable, and so that's all we care about. So when we use that stick in the airplane, what we're getting is usable fuel. That's an important one. If I do a mock oral exam, that's one thing I ask, because that's super important to understand that when you stick that tank and you come up with 12 gallons in one side and 12 gallons the other, that means you have 24 gallons usable, not total, usable. So when we're using that little thing, that little glass thing, dipstick, it says on there usable. Okay, so let's just use that example. Let's just say we had 12 gallons aside. All right, so that's 24 gallons. Don't put 24 right here. That's not the weight. All right, the weight of the fuel is 6 pounds per gallon. You're going to just memorize that. Okay, so the weight of fuel is 6 pounds per gallon. So we're going to go 24 times 6, and that is 144 pounds, all right? Then we just simply do 144 times 48. Remember, we got that in the type certificate data sheet, in that systems limitation sheet that came right off the type certificate data sheet. So 144 times 48 equals 6912. Okay? All right, now we come up with a ramp weight. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do, because I've already got 6912 here, 6912 plus 83,437.8 equals 90,000. So 90,349.8. Okay. All right. Hang in there with me. Hang in there with me. It's once you do this a lot, it'll just go really quick. Now, ramp condition, we're going to add the empty totals plus the fuel. So we're going to have 1900.52 plus 144 equals 2044.52. Okay. Let me move that there. Perfect. Okay. All right, so this is our ramp weight. All right, this is before we exit off the ramp. Okay, one thing we want to make sure is that that is not above our maximum gross weight, which is 2,300. Again, go to your type certificate data sheet. It tells you those limitations. That systems and limitation sheet that I showed you, it has that as well. So we just want to make sure that's not above 23. If it is, we've got to take something out. All right, and if you don't want to kick people out, that means you might have to take fuel out. All right, but again, as long as I'm landing with 10 gallons, I'm okay. All right. One situation is a lot of people are like, always top the airplane off. Well, if you get an airplane that has a, maximum gallon capacity of like 96 gallons, you know, and it only burns like 15 gallons an hour, why do you top it off all the time? Because then you can't put 4 people in there if you need to, right? So if you can take, if this was overweight, but we didn't need 38 gallons, well, and we only needed 20, well, you could take 18 gallons away, and 18 gallons times 6, I mean, that's another, 100, let's see, another 108 pounds, right? So you could, take that off of the airplane and use that for baggage or whatever. So use fuel if you need to, you don't have to have it topped off, right? But fuel is really, really important, right? Do not land with less than at least an hour of fuel. So for airplane, that's around about 8 gallons, right? But to me, 10 gallons is minimum. I'm not landing anywhere planned with less than 10 gallons, period. So anyways, there's a ramp condition. So that's below 2,300. We're already looking good. Fuel for taxi and startup, that's always 1 gallon. Now, where do I get that? Let me show you. I'm going to go here to our performance manual, which is right here. And I'm going to show you if you see right here. Okay, so right here, fuel used includes warm-up and takeoff allowance. So if you see right here at sea level, 1 gallon is used. So they calculate it takes 1 gallon to do your taxi and do your startup and do all that. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of that, go back to here. So 1 gallon, how much is that? That's 6 pounds a gallon, right? So 6 times 48, that's going to be 288. I'm going to put 288 right here. And then this will give us our takeoff condition. So that's going to be 2044.52. And that's going to be minus 6, right? Because we burned that fuel off. So that means our takeoff weight is 2038.52. And then we're going to subtract that 288, right? So 90,349.8 minus 288 is 90,000. 61.8. Again, why did we subtract that? Is because we burned that fuel off, right? We burned it. Now, let's just say we go out for an hour flight. For usually it's about an hour, right? So we're just going to say we burned 8 gallons. So 8 times 6 equals 48. So fuel used in flight would be 48. And then we're going to multiply that by the arm of 48. So that is 2304. And again, we're going to subtract these two because that's what we burn, right? So we've got 2038.52 minus 48 equals a landing weight of 1,990.52. And then we're going to do this minus this, so 90,061.8 minus 2304 equals 87,757.8, and we are done with the weight and balance. Okay, now I know that looks like a whole lot, but once you do this over and over and over, you're going to get used to it. All right, so basically we're going to start here and we're going to determine where our CG falls. So we have weight, we have moment, and then we have a landing weight and a landing moment. Okay, so we're going to mark the ramp condition and then we're going to mark the landing condition and make sure we stay in that center of gravity envelope. So we have this beautiful little envelope that's just below where we calculated that. So let's see, 90, so we're going to go 90,349. Now, an important fact here is that this is moment divided by 1,000. Okay, so make sure that we are dividing that by 1,000. So basically, we're just going to say this is 90.3. All right. So 2,000, we'll go 2,050 and 90.3. So it's just as simple as we're going to go 2,050 right here, and then we're going to come across, and then we're going to go 90.3. It's going to be about right here. We come up to about right there. Okay, so there's where our center of gravity. Are we in the envelope? Yeah, absolutely, right? So you would take a little pencil and you would mark that, okay? So I'll just go ahead and do that here. So we got 90.3, 20.5. So we're just going to say it falls about right there, okay? Now then, we're going to come up here and we're going to mark our landing weight. So we got basically 2,000 pounds and we got 87, we'll go 87.8. So we're going to go right here to 87.8, about right here, and then we're going to go right there to 2,000 pounds. So 87.8. This doesn't have to be perfect, just somewhere there. Okay. All right, and then we can draw a line between the two. That's how our center of gravity is going to change in flight. So ramp is right here. Takeoff is pretty much the same. It's only 6 pounds different, so it's pretty much the exact same. And then when we land, we're going to be right here. So you can see as we burn fuel, we're basically staying right in that envelope. So we're guaranteed for takeoff and for landing, we stay in the center of gravity envelope. Awesome, right? So now that we've done that, now we have our weight. So now we can calculate our takeoff performance, okay? Now another step, if we wanted to go the next step, is we could do moment divided by weight equals CG, okay? So I'm just going to do this at the ramp condition. So the moment is 90,349.8, and then we're going to divide that by the weight, which is 2,044.52. That's going to give us a CG of 44.19. So let me put that right here. That's going to be 44.19 CG. So what does that mean? Okay, that basically means that in this scenario, with the bags that we have, with the people that we have, with the fuel that we have, if we set it on a pole at 44.19 inches after the datum point, remember where that datum point is? It's a point of reference. That's where this thing would just sit there and where we just sit there on the pole, right? So 44.19, I'll show you in this. So 44.19, that means the center of gravity falls about where the passenger seat is, about right there. And that's usually where it's always going to kind of be. So this is kind of where our center of gravity falls, is about right here. Okay, so again, we don't have to do that extra step because our center of gravity envelope only has moment and weight. But it's not a bad idea to, some airplanes you have to do that. I think Piper's, they have a center of gravity envelope, so you have to make that one extra step. Okay, so now it's as simple as we're going to do our takeoff data and landing data. So it's pretty simple. We've got our weight, and we've got our takeoff weight, and we've got our landing weight. So takeoff weight is 2,038. So we're just going to say 2,100. Landing weight is 1990. We'll just say 2,000. All right. Most conservative wins. Please don't try to get too technical with these numbers. Okay. Just roundabout numbers, and then go on the more conservative side of it. Okay. So with these numbers, we're going to go to our performance data, and so that's going to be on up here. All right, so right here is our takeoff data. All right, now if you see, we have 2,300 pounds, 2,000 pounds, and 1,700 pounds. Where were we? We were like 2,100 pounds, right? And this takeoff data is going to be predicated on pressure, what's your pressure, and what's your temperature, right? Now, always read the notes. Always read the notes for your AFM and your performance data. So it says increase distance 10% for each 25 degrees above standard temperature for a particular altitude. For operation on a dry grass runway, increase distance, both the ground run and total to clear 50-foot obstacle, by 7% of the total to clear 50-foot obstacle figure. So basically, if we're operating on dry grass, we're going to add 7%. And then for each 25 degrees above standard temperature, we're going to add 10%. Why? Because we talked about that in the first video, right? Performance limitations, density of the altitude, right? It decreases performance. So if you look here, this is pressure altitude. So we got sea level, we got 2,500, we got 5,000, we've got 7,500. So that is pressure altitude. And if you look, there's your standard temperature, right? Remember, pressure altitude, standard temperature 59, pressure altitude, standard temperature. This is your standard temperature 25. 41 is your standard temperature of 5,000, and so forth. Okay, so all we're going to have to do is come in here at pressure altitude, and then we're going to determine what the temperature is, and then we would just add 10% for each 25 degrees above standard. Okay, so let's just go ahead and I'm going to make up a number. Let's just say our altimeter we'll just say it's 3012, and then our temperature is we'll go with say 70 degrees. All right. What would that be? Like about 20 degrees Celsius. Now, again, these Mach models, man, 1975, everything's in degrees, it's in miles per hour, and then literally they all changed it to now everything's in Celsius and knots and stuff. So just go with what you have. All right. So we're gonna go in this chart. First, we got to determine pressure altitude, because this is pressure altitude. So 3012, that's what the first video was about. 3012 minus 2992, that's 0.2, so that's 200 feet. High pressure means better performance, lower pressure altitude. So our airplane altitude is 569 feet. So pressure altitude is going to be lower with a higher pressure, so it's going to be 369 feet. All right. Well, look here. We have sea level and we have 2,500. It's like, come on. These charts are awful. The newer airplanes, they'll have sea level 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, 4,000 feet, and so forth. Okay. So I have created an I call this a non-approved interpolation takeoff data that starts at sea level, goes to 1,000, 2,000, then ends at where the chart picks back up at 2,500. Okay, this just makes it a little bit easier because I've already done the interpolation data there. Same thing. Here's your gross weight. All right. Here's your VX. Right. All this, by the way, all of this data is predicated on a short field takeoff technique for takeoff, and then the landing numbers are predicated on a short field landing technique. Now, you won't get you won't be doing those until after your solo, but all of these numbers are predicated on that, okay? Also, I did put 0 headwind in here. If you look at the takeoff chart here, it gives you 0 headwind, 10 knot headwind, 20 knot headwind. I'm on the, I say most conservative wind, so even if I had a 10 knot headwind, I'm going to go in the chart at 0 because that just gives me more of a padding, right? Plus, how do you know you have exactly 10 knots? If you calculate this and then you roll on the runway and then it shifts 90 degrees, well, now you don't have correct numbers, right? So, and these electronics, so if you're using Preflight, they only take half of the headwind anyways and give it to you. And then if you was to be taken off with a tailwind, we never take off with a tailwind, but most airplanes do have a maximum 10 knot tailwind component. If you take off, if you have, no more than 10 knot tailwind, but if you take off with a 10 knot tailwind, they actually factor in 150% of that tailwind into those calculations. But so anyways, that's the reason why I just have 0 right here, is because, hey, that's more conservative, okay? So we're gonna go right here to 1,000 because we were at 369 feet. All right, well, I don't want to interpret between here, it's close enough. So I'm just gonna go right here, most conservative winds. And we are at 20, what do we say, like 2,044? So we're going to be right in between these two. All right, so let's just, easy math. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but we can do 935 plus 680. So I'm just getting the middle ground in between here. So 935 plus 680 divided by 2 equals 810 feet. Okay, so I'm going to say 810 feet on a ground run. And then to clear a 50-foot obstacle would be right in between here. So probably 1,300 feet, 1,400 feet, something like that. Now that would be at standard temperature. It's 70 degrees, right? So what does our chart tell us to do? Add 10% for each 25. So 25 plus 55 would be 75, that'd be 80. Okay, so that's conservative. We'll just add 10% to these numbers. So we came up with 810. We'll add another 81 feet to that. So basically, let's just say that's going to be 900. Okay, so we're going to come up with 900 for our ground run right here. Let's put that there. All right, and now we're going to go back to that chart. We're going to come up with our 50-foot obstacle. Okay, so we're going to go back to 1,000. We're going to interpret between these two. So we're going to go, remember the reason why we're doing that is because our weight was about 2,100. So we're just kind of going in between. So it's actually more conservative to just go right in between them. But 1679 plus 1187 divided by 2 equals 1433. And then we're going to add 10% to that. So that's going to be 1576. So we'll just say 1600. You see how I'm always I'm like going more conservative, more conservative. There's a theme to that you're going to get. So we're going to go 1600 right here. Okay. So do you understand? I hope you kind of understand where I got that. All right. And we're going to do the same thing with the landing performance. So we're going to go up here to our landing chart. If you'll see, our landing chart is even more simple. It's like, man, in 1975, these guys, 2,300 pounds, there's our speed that we're going to be over 50 feet. And then we have sea level, we have 2,500. I don't have an interpolation chart, but there's only a difference of 40 feet. So forget it. I'm going to go up here to the more conservative again. And it doesn't even have you add in, anything with the notes. I always read the notes. It just says reduce landing distance each 10% for each 5-knot headwind. Well, I'm not going to do that because I'm more conservative. Operation of dry grass runway, you're going to add 20% that it says right there. So I'm going to go right here. Most conservative winds. And so 560, 1310 is my number. It doesn't give us anything other than 2300, even though we're landing at 2000. So these are more conservative numbers. So we're just going to use this 560 and 1310. So, boy, it's a lot easier to do the landing data though, right? Because they don't really give you much there. Okay. So we said 1310 to clear 50-foot obstacle. And then we said 560 ground run. Okay. So here's our takeoff performance. Here's our landing performance. All right. Now, this is calculated performance. And right off the ACS, we're going to look at it in just a second. Right off the ACS, it talks about calculated versus actual performance. All right. So this is calculated performance. Now, I am not going to take off. Now, ground run is actual feet on the pavement, okay? Or feet on the pavement, wheels on the pavement, all right? This would be to clear 50-foot obstacle. Same thing here. You'd need 1,310 foot of surface past that 50-foot obstacle, okay? But once the wheels touch, you only need 560 feet to actually come to a complete stop. Wheels on the pavement. So these numbers are calculated performance. It's calculated on a brand new airplane with a brand new engine with a test pilot, okay? So I am going to add a safety factor to these numbers. And you know what? Personally, my safety factor is 2.0. So I'm going to multiply these by 2, all right? So I'm going to do 900 times 2. Obviously, that's 1,800. So I'm going to put 1,800 up here. And then we're going to go the 1,600 times 2. That's going to be, of course, 3,200. And then we're going to go 560 times 2. That's going to be 1,120. Be 1,120. And then we're going to go 1,310 times 2. It's going to be 2,620. Okay. So now, if I have a 3,000 foot runway, all right, yeah, I'm good with that. I can land with that. All right. I've got, 1,500 feet of pavement out there for me to land on. I'm good with that. If I have, 2,200 feet of pavement or so, I'm good with that because I need 1,800. If I have at least about 3,200 feet to clear a 50-foot obstacle, I'm good with that. So if you get a theme here, calculated versus actual performance. Our actual performance could be a lot worse because it's not a brand new airplane. It's not a brand new engine. It's older. And then also, you may not do the exact short field takeoff technique like the test pilot did, right? You may not do the exact short field landing technique. You may not be right at that 69 miles per hour that it said on the landing data. And I will say too, make sure you read the conditions on your landing data. So our landing data right here is predicated on no wind, 40 degrees of flaps, and power off. So if you don't do 40 degrees of flaps, well, you're not guaranteed these numbers. So that's why in the short field landing, you have to do 40 degrees of flaps in your training. Otherwise, you can do, whatever flap rate you want. So, all right, so we're coming back down here, and we have done this sheet. We've done the weight and balance. We've come up with where we are in the center of gravity envelope. We've come up with takeoff, landing performance. Also, again, I wanted to show you this, the weight and balance, the aircraft specific weight and balance is right here. So that is where we're getting, like I said, that's where we're getting this basic empty weight number right there is on the previous slide. And the last thing that we're going to do, okay, and then we're done with this this video. The last thing you're going to do before your flight is this 91103. Okay, so 91103 is NWKRAFT. We talked about that in pilot qualifications. All right, N stands for NOTAMs. So we need to be NOTAMs is notices to air missions. So NOTAMs is like runway closures or whatever. I'll show you where that is. W is the weather. Okay, so we need to be familiar with the weather. So if we're looking for, watch the weather information videos. If we're looking for the weather right now, we're going to look at METARs. If we're looking for the weather in the next 24 hours, we're going to look at the terminal air forecast. If there's not a terminal air forecast where your airport is, because the terminal air forecast is only good for 5 nautical miles, you're going to look for the graphical aviation forecast, and that's like an area forecast. And then if you're looking for past 24 hours, this won't be the case here, but you're looking at a proc chart. So you're basically the weather, you're looking at METARs, you're looking at terminal air forecast, you're looking at the graphical aviation forecast to do that. The K here is the known ATC delay, so that's IFR only, don't worry about that. R is the runway length, so we'll do that in just a second. A is any alternates. So if you're doing a cross country, make sure you have other alternates. But also, if you're going out to the practice area, make sure you have alternates. I can't tell you how many times that I've gone out in the practice area in the summertime and a thunderstorm develops over the field. Well, of course, I'm not going back to land at thunderstorm. So make sure you got enough fuel to go to an alternate airport. Around Gadsden, there are plenty of alternate airports, within less than a 30-minute flight, right? So make sure you have that extra fuel to plan for an alternate. Speaking of fuel, there's your fuel. So again, make sure you got enough to do your flight training, whatever you're planning to do for the day, or cross country or whatever, and then also add in a little bit extra to do your alternate. So that's your fuel requirements. I think my senior quote in high school was, "You never have too much fuel on board unless you're on fire." All right, so the 3 most important things on a pre-flight are fuel, fuel, and fuel. Fuel is super, super, super important. T is takeoff data. So that's exactly what we just did right here. So this is our takeoff and landing data, making sure we can take off and land within the runway provided. Okay, so real quick, let's show you where we would get those NOTAMs, where we'd get that weather, where we would get the runway length, and then we basically came up with how much fuel we needed for the flight, but we'll do that as well. All right, everyone, and so let's look where we are going to get this NWKRAFT. So I'm going to go into ForeFlight. I do recommend students get the ForeFlight, especially once you get into the cross-country stage. Prior to that, the pre-solo stage, not necessarily something you have to do. We keep ForeFlight on iPads in the airplane, so you can certainly use that to get this information. But let me show you where we go here on the iPad to get the NWKRAFT. So N is going to be NOTAM. So I'm right here on the airports page, which is, let me just go right here. So click on airports right here. And then if you don't, I've got it in the favorites, but up here in the top left, you can just click, you can hit Kilo Golf Alpha Delta. You can hit go, and then it brings you to this page. Okay, so right here, we're going to go to NOTAMs, and then we're going to read these NOTAMs. So it looks like taxiway alpha work in progress, 624 markings are not standard, automated weather precipitation not available. So not a big deal. So that's where then I would go back here, and on the NOTAMs, I would write anything that was important. I wouldn't write any of those ones down. I would just basically be like not applicable. So like NA right there. But now if they had a runway closure or something, then yeah, right here you would say runway, 3618 is closed, runway 624 is closed, or at your destination, you would also check your NOTAMs and you would write them right there. So again, NOTAMs are just notices to air missions there. So W is going to be weather. So I'm going to go right back to our iPad here. And so if you look right here, pretty simple to find weather. Not that hard. So METAR is if you want to look at the weather right now, there's your METAR, all right? So look at weather information videos to be able to read this raw data. You don't have to now, but you do need to be able to read this raw data for your check ride. But winds are 050 at 5, 10 miles clear below 12. If you look and like I've got a video, ForeFlight briefing, ForeFlight planning and briefing video, kind of walks in like how to use the weather, how to use the briefing. So I suggest you watch that video to go in depth there. But basically winds are 050 at 5, and our taxiways here we have 6 and 24, 36, or runways 36. So runway 6 would be where we would be going there. But yeah, weather looks pretty good, right? 10 miles, clear below 12,000. We can go to terminal air forecast. The closest one to us is Anniston. It's going to get a little bit worse as we go on, but for basically, for the next few hours, 6 p.m. right now to 1 a.m., weather looks good. And then, you could go down here to imagery, and then you could do the graphical aviation forecast, southeast cloud. And again, I went through all of this on the weather information video. Okay, so basically for our flight around the pattern or around the area, the weather looks good. So basically, I would write down here in the weather, I would write down the winds, 05005, clear. You write down your altimeter setting. You're using that altimeter setting to get your takeoff data and stuff, right? We did all this on just a fake one. I didn't do the actual ones today. Known ATC delays, runway length. So that's again going to for flight. So if we go down here to the airports button, and then we're going to go right here to info. You can also get this on runway. So if you click on runway, you see how it shows you the distances there. You can also go right here to info, and then you can scroll down to this AFD, and it will also tell you there. Again, I break this down in that ForeFlight video, that ForeFlight briefing video. So please watch that if you want to get in depth of how to use ForeFlight. But 6,802 feet by 150 feet, asphalt grooved runway, runway 3618, 4806 by 100. There is no displaced thresholds anywhere. So your takeoff run available and your landing distance available is the same. So you would basically just go then to right here with the runways. You would put that 6802, so 624, 6802 by 150, 3618 is 4806 by 100. So you just want to make sure you got enough runway to take off and land. And obviously we have plenty, right? The 2620 was at 3200. Our shortest runway is 4,800. So not a problem there. Alternates, we've got plenty of alternates around. Fuel reserve, so that's kind of where we're going. If you're going to go on a flight, training flight, I would say, most of those training flights are going to be an hour or so. So I'm just going to chalk up 10 gallons for that. Land minimum 10 gallons. So to me, 20 gallons is about minimum that I'm going to take off with on a training flight. Okay, so that's the fuel, and then here's your takeoff data. So that walks through the NWKRAFT. So that checks the box on our 91103. So we're familiar with all available weather, all available resources, and so forth. Now, one caveat, and then we're done with this video. Okay, when we look at the takeoff performance, okay, I want to show you a little trick on this chart. So I want to go right here to the normal chart, and then we'll go to the interpolation chart. All right, so if you look, you see how this is standard. Okay, so pressure, altitude, and standard temperature. Pressure, altitude, standard temperature, pressure, altitude, standard temperature, pressure, altitude, standard temperature. So the way that this chart is organized, we can come in at this chart at density altitude. Does that make sense? So if we factor up density altitude, so if density altitude was 2,000 feet, remember we did all that in the performance and limitations part 1. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, watch part 1 video first. But if density altitude was 2,000 feet, we could just come right here to 2,500 and boom, there's our number. So if we were at 2,300, that would be our, 1,040, 1910. If we were at 2,000, or if we were right in between them, we could just interpolate between those two numbers just like we did, okay? But because this is standard temperature, this is standard temperature, they have standardized this. So what is density altitude? Well, density altitude is your standardization, right? it takes into account non-standard pressure and non-standard temperature, right? So that is your number. So you can use this chart with density altitude, and it makes it a little bit easier. And again, where would you find density altitude? Let me show you. So on Preflight, we're going to go back to the airports. There we go. Airports page. We're going to go back to weather right here. And we're going to go to the METAR. And if you'll look, I'm going to scroll down and look. It tells you right here, density altitude is negative 905 feet. So boom. Now this only works for our charts. It doesn't work for other ones. I will show you how the majority of other charts work. It's really simple, but ours, you can just go into density altitude. So negative 905 right here, we can just go right back to browsers. That means I would just go right here at sea level. Then depending on my weight, there's my numbers. So that would be what I would use like right now with it being negative. If the, if it was, if your density altitude was 2,000 feet, I would just use these numbers right here. There's 2,000 feet. That's 2,300 pounds. That's 2,000 pounds if you need to interpolate, or, who cares if you're at 2,150 or 2,200 pounds, just round up, go to most conservative. Most conservative wins in aviation. You could use that ground run and that clear fitted foot obstacle, and then you could double those numbers, okay? So that's a little bit easier way to use this chart, is to go in at density altitude. So just, if density altitude was sea level, use this. If it's 1,000 feet, use that. If density altitude is 2,000 feet, use that, and so forth, right? Now, again, that's not how the chart was designed to be used, right? It was designed to go in at pressure altitude and then add 10% for each 25 degrees Fahrenheit. But it works out the same way because of the way they do this chart that standardizes it. Well, that's what density altitude is, okay? So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, ask your CFI how that makes sense. But I will show you real quick how the majority of charts are. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to find like the Cirrus. I'm just going to do SR22. I'm going to pull that up. And I'm going to show you how the modern day aircraft does this. All right. It's a whole lot easier than what we just did right there. So here's takeoff weight at 3,600, takeoff weight at 2,900. Okay. So you know your weights, or you could interpret between the two. But look here, always read the notes, right? So there's your weight, speed at liftoff, that's your VR, rotation speed, speed at 50-foot obstacle, that's your VX, 84. You've got 50% flaps, takeoff, dry pave, level runway. Here's a headwind. If you would subtract 10% for each 12 knots of headwind. Remember, I'm most conservative. I'm not going to use that. Tailwind, though, you'd add 10% for each 2 knots of tailwind, up to 10 knots. I told you that you cannot do any more than 10 knots tailwind, but don't do a tailwind regardless, right? But there may be some circumstances where you would need to, but you would definitely add those in. Add 10% for each 2 knots of tailwind for that. It walks into dry grass, wet grass, air conditioner, and all that to add in. But if you see right here, it's really simple. You would just go in at pressure altitude, and then you find your temperature. So pressure altitude, again, in our situation at Gadsden, 3012 means 369 feet. So I would just go here to 1,000 feet, jump up. If it was, 20 degrees Celsius, then boom, there's your ground run. There's your clear 50-foot obstacle. If it was 30, there's your ground run. There's clear 50-foot obstacle. So you see how much easier this is? How much easier the new charts are compared to what we have, which is this, right? This is my chart that I came up with, but this is what was published. You see the difference? The new airplanes are so much easier. But with the way that our chart is built, you can come in at density altitude. Again, the way they wanted you to do the chart was the way we did it when we came up with those numbers. But you can come in here at density altitude and then run your numbers from there. Remember, most conservative wins, who cares? If you're at like 21, 2200 on the weight, you can just go straight to 23. If you want to interpret, like if you were at 2100 or 2044 like we were, you saw how I interpreted the data there. But it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. If you notice, when we got down here to our takeoff performance, is we doubled that, right? So there's your calculated performance. There's my actual performance. I just doubled it as a safety factor. There was our center of gravity, talked about how to work through that. And then we also talked about how to work the NWKRAFT. All right. Now, if you want to print this off and practice this, again, everything is on the website. So if you look right here, this is the printable weight and balance form. So this is exactly what I just had on that slide. So you can print them off and whatever. I did add some notes down here. The arm was found in the type certificate data sheet and the weight and balance manual. I explained that. Always add a safety margin to those performance calculations. Consider a safety factor of 2.0 there. So, all right. I know that was a lot, okay, but I appreciate you hanging in there with me. You know, that NWKRAFT you're going to do prior to every flight. That weight and balance you're going to do prior to every flight. The takeoff data and the landing data you're going to do prior to every single flight. So take the time, rewatch this video, pause it, print those forms out, and just work those problems over and over and over. You know, getting that takeoff data, that landing data, and so forth. Okay, so hope this was helpful. You know, comment if you got any questions. If I confused the crap out of you, I'm sorry. Comment, I can help explain, or if I need to redo this video in a better way, just let me know. Like, comment, subscribe, and appreciate you watching the Performance and Limitations Part 2. Thanks a lot.